It was my grandson's birthday. I came early carrying cake and gifts, but when I walked in, no one looked at me. No one said hello, and my seat, the one I'd always had, was gone. My daughter-in-law looked at me, smirked, and said, "Oops, guess you weren't invited. If you think this is just another ordinary family story, you're wrong." Subscribe now so you won't miss the next jaw-dropping episodes from us. Montclair was still half asleep when the sun spilled like warm honey across the slate roofs and climbing ivy of Chestnut Street. Birds chirped lazily. A paperboy wheeled by with earbuds, oblivious to the kind of morning that would mark the beginning of a quiet revolution, one that would start, not with a scream, but with the soft thud of a letter dropping into a mailbox. The house at number 47 had stood there since 1912. A pale blue Victorian with flaking trim and a stubborn wisteria that wrapped itself possessively around the porch rails. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and old wood lingered like memory. And upstairs, in a room that once belonged to her late husband, sat Joanne Turner, 78 years old. Stubborn as the antique cabinet she polished each Sunday, and quieter than most people knew how to handle. Joanne had lived in that house longer than her daughter-in-law had been alive. Longer than her own son Paul had been married. It was her home even if the deed had technically been transferred for simplicity after her stroke 3 years ago. That's what Paul had said. "It's just a formality, Mom. For taxes. Nothing changes." Everything changed, but slowly. This morning, Joanne was on her knees in the garden, coaxing tulips from the July soil. Dirt streaked her gloves, her sun hat tilted at an angle that gave her the look of a woman who didn't entirely care whether or not she was seen. Her hands moved with practiced tenderness, and when a bee buzzed too close to her neck, she just smiled faintly and hummed. From the kitchen window, Melissa watched her with the same mix of tension and boredom she'd carried since moving in 5 years ago. She sipped her smoothie, scrolled her phone, and shut the curtain. Joanne didn't notice, or maybe she did, but she kept humming. The front door creaked around 7:10. Joanne stood and wiped her palms against her apron. Her hips ached, her back pulled in all the wrong places, but she still moved with grace as she walked to the mailbox beside the gate. There was the usual mess: supermarket flyers, a coupon for citing a church newsletter she never read, and one envelope with no return address but her name printed in that unmistakable font that banks love: formal, precise, sterile. She held it for a second longer than she meant to. Inside the house, Paul was on his second cup of coffee, tapping away at his laptop. Something about his mother being out there alone bothered him, but not enough to put the cup down. Joanne sat at the edge of her floral armchair, the unopened envelope balanced on her knee. Sunlight carved a line down the room, catching the photo of her and her husband on the mantel, he in his uniform, she in a white dress, laughing, holding his hand like it was the last thing on earth she'd ever let go of. She ran a thumb along the envelope's edge, then opened it. It was a mortgage statement. Not unusual. She still received statements from the original mortgage, though the house had been paid off years ago. What caught her eye, what flipped a small switch deep inside her chest, was the phrase, "Second Lien Mortgage Activity Summary." Her hand paused. She blinked, then read again. The document listed a new line of credit against the house, a second mortgage. But she hadn't signed anything. Joanne turned the page. Her name was there, signature at the bottom, and her stomach went cold. The signature looked like hers, but it wasn't. It mimicked the swirl in her J, the long stroke in the T of Turner, but something about the pressure, the uneven tail of the E, rang false. She'd taught cursive for 30 years. She knew forgery when she saw it. She folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and stood. Upstairs, the floors still creaked in the same spots they had when Paul was a boy, sneaking into the kitchen for cookies after bedtime. Joanne climbed the staircase slowly, one hand on the banister. She passed by the family photos that had once been a source of pride: birthdays, vacations, Paul's college graduation. These days they looked like staged memories, frozen smiles. At the top of the stairs, she paused outside her old study. The door was half open, the room largely untouched. Her books lined the shelves, her reading chair still under the window. The computer, a 10-year-old desktop, still booted up, though it took its time. She sat down, heart tapping against her ribs like a cautious knock. On the browser bar, she typed "second mortgage fraud by family member." The search results blinked to life. Law firm ads, Reddit threads, articles with titles like "When Loved Ones Steal Your Home" and "Elder Financial Abuse, What to Do." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she opened her email and typed in the account number from the letter, clicked through to the lender's website, verified the last 4 of her social security number, logged in. There it was. A loan taken out 6 weeks ago, disbursement sent to a joint account, her name, Melissa's name. She clicked View Documents. The scanned signature appeared on screen. Joanne stared at it. Her breath shallowed. She reached for her reading glasses, put them on, looked again. Whoever had done it had taken their time. They had practiced. And yet it was wrong. Joanne leaned back in the chair, exhaled slowly. Her fingers drummed against the armrest. There was a moment, a very brief private moment, when her throat burned, when her chest caved inward, as if all the air in the room had been pulled out by some unseen force, when the betrayal, intimate, calculating, and so quiet, landed like a blade just beneath her ribs. But she didn't cry. Instead, she stood. Downstairs, she heard Melissa laughing over the phone, telling someone about a weekend trip to Cape May. Joanne walked past the guest room into the hallway that led to the attic. The door creaked open. A narrow staircase led up to the topmost floor, half-finished, dusty, and silent. It had once been her husband's studio, then Paul's teenage hideout. Lately, it had been a dumping ground for storage bins and forgotten furniture. She pulled the chain to the attic light. A single bulb buzzed to life. Joanne climbed up slowly, one step at a time, her mind sharper than it had been in years. She looked around. Dust particles floated in the shaft of light like ash in a cathedral. A trunk sat in the corner. An old rocking chair, a small writing desk, a pile of mismatched rugs, and the small camping stove they had used on that one disastrous trip to Lake Placid. She smiled. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She turned and looked down the stairs, closed the attic door gently, locked it from the inside. For the first time in a long time, her mind was clear. Back downstairs, Paul asked Melissa, "Did Mom go out?" Melissa shrugged, barely looking up from her phone. Probably the garden again. But Joanne was already unrolling an extension cord, plugging it into the wall socket near the floor vent. She found the small tripod and her old webcam wrapped in a towel from 2008. She wiped off the dust. She set up the camera near the dormer window facing the desk. The sun was climbing higher now, bouncing off the neighbors' wind chimes. A school bus rumbled in the distance. Joanne took a deep breath, then clicked the red button. The camera's light blinked on. She looked straight into the lens, her face calm, her voice steady. "Good morning," she said. "My name is Joanne Turner. I'm 78 years old, and I think it's time we talked about betrayal." Joanne didn't sleep that night. The envelope was back on her lap, unfolded now, pages smoothed flat, like the skin of an old scar. Her reading glasses slid down her nose as she zoomed in on the PDF from the lender's site. Her signature stared back at her again. Not a smudge, not a rushed scribble. Whoever had done it had practiced. She imagined them hunched over a piece of scrap paper, tracing J after J, stroke after stroke, like a child forging a hall pass. She slid her glasses off and set them on the desk. The air in the attic was dry and still. There was a particular kind of silence that only old houses held, a silence that listened. Joanne opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet beside her, the one with the brass handle she'd repaired herself after Paul broke it, slamming it shut in a teenage rage over curfew. She pulled out the thick accordion folder that contained every important piece of her life: birth certificate, marriage license, her will, the deed to the house, and a manila envelope labeled in careful cursive signatures legal. She laid the documents side by side: her 2009 refinancing form, her 2013 tax documents, her 2017 living will, and now the 2025 forged lien. She held each signature up to the light. Her hand trembled. The J in Joanne was always distinct. She looped it counterclockwise, a habit from her Catholic school handwriting classes. The turner always carried a flourish on the final R, a small swoop she'd never been able to unlearn. But this signature, this imposter, it was like someone had traced the lines without knowing the muscle behind them. It had no weight, no memory. Melissa. It couldn't be Paul. Not because he was too honest, he wasn't, but because Paul's mind had always worked in straight lines. He couldn't have forged that signature without it looking like a middle school detention note. Melissa, on the other hand, had a steadiness about her. She wore precision, like perfume. Joanne closed the folder slowly, aligning the edges perfectly. She slid it back into the drawer, then opened the small wall safe behind the closet panel and placed the forged document inside. She locked it, turning the dial with the same methodical calm she used when buttering toast. Downstairs a door slammed. Paul's voice drifted up through the air vents. "I told you I'll pay the credit card when we get the next draw from the line." "It's fine, Mel. It's under control." Her name. Mel. He called her that now, like they were always in some kind of private negotiation. Joanne listened, then stood. She didn't speak to them the next day. At breakfast, she made herself oatmeal aided on the back steps while they clinked forks behind the kitchen wall. She wore her hair pinned up a scarf over her shoulders, and she said nothing. Melissa didn't notice. Paul might have, but if he did, he said nothing either. That afternoon, Joanne went back up to the attic. It was time. She packed quietly. A small floral suitcase, faded but clean, 2 dresses, a pair of comfortable shoes, her rosary, a notebook, her wedding ring, a framed photo of her son as a child laughing with chocolate cake on his cheeks. She placed the suitcase near the attic stairs. Then she waited. Dinner came and went. A casserole had been placed in the oven, Melissa's version of making peace, which always included overcooked pasta and too much cheese. Joanne didn't touch it. By 9:00 p.m., the house fell into its normal nighttime lull. The television flickered from the living room. Melissa laughed too loudly at something that wasn't funny. Paul said something she didn't catch. A glass clinked. A cabinet shut. Joanne moved silently. She unplugged the Wi-Fi extender from her bedroom and brought it upstairs. She had already tested the signal in the attic 2 days ago, strong enough for video. She installed the backup webcam. She rolled out a faded rug in the corner near the dormer window. She hung a tapestry over the insulation board to make the background look softer. She lit a small lavender candle, placed it beside the camera. She closed the attic door behind her, bolted it from the inside. Then she sat in the rocking chair, opened the laptop, and waited for the system to boot. The cursor blinked at her like a heartbeat. Joanne clicked into the live stream platform. Her account had no followers, no posts, no likes, just a name, Attic Joe 78. She stared at her reflection in the preview window. Her face was unmade, her eyes hollow with the weight of days past. And yet in that moment she didn't look broken. She looked ready. Her hand hovered over the Go Live button. Downstairs, the sound of Melissa laughing grew louder. Joanne clicked. A red dot appeared on the screen. The stream was live. She cleared her throat. "My name," she said, her voice soft but certain, "is Joanne Turner. And tonight I want to tell you a story." She paused. "It's not a happy story, but I think it's mine to tell. There was no one watching, not yet." She didn't care. She went on. "This house belonged to me and my husband. We built it together piece by piece. That front porch. He hammered every nail. That garden outside the kitchen window, I planted those tulips in 1983. She reached down and picked up the forged document from the side table. "This here is a betrayal." She held it up to the lens. Her hand didn't shake. "This is what it looks like when someone you fed, housed, protected someone you love, signs your name and turns your home into a bargaining chip." She leaned in. "I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't beg them to explain. A beat. I packed a suitcase, I came up here, and I started this live stream." The chat box remained empty. Still, she smiled faintly. "Not because I want revenge, not because I'm angry, but because I think maybe someone else out there knows how this feels." Joanne closed the document and set it down. She pulled the lavender candle closer. "I'm going to stay here a while. In this attic. I won't be shouting. I won't be knocking down doors. But I will be here. Every night. Talking, reading, thinking." She looked straight into the camera. "Because when they take your voice, you don't need to yell to get it back. Sometimes You just need to whisper in the right direction. She reached to end the stream. A ding echoed from her speakers. A comment. At the real Abby, this broke me. Please keep talking. Joanne stared for a second, then closed the laptop. Downstairs, Paul looked around the hallway. Mom, he called out. Melissa didn't even glance up from her tablet. She said she was going to visit Aunt Marie or something. For the weekend. Paul frowned. She didn't say anything to me. She's old, Paul. Maybe she forgot. The attic door didn't creak. No one noticed it had been locked from the inside. But upstairs, surrounded by quiet and candlelight, Joanne was already peeling open her notebook and writing the first line of a new chapter. The candle flickered against the attic wall, casting dancing shadows across the old rocking chair and the wrinkled map of Joanne's life. The attic smelled faintly of cedar and dust, a kind of private sanctuary carved out of forgotten storage and silence. Outside, the crickets were beginning their song, but inside something else was beginning something more electric. Joanne opened her notebook to a page already creased from use. She smoothed it flat with the palm of her hand. Her pen hovered, then dropped into the spine of the book as she looked back at the webcam. Her fingers found the Go Live button again. She didn't hesitate this time. The screen lit up. The little red dot in the corner blinked to life. A notification pinged somewhere on the internet, alerting an algorithm, a stream queue, a stranger scrolling late at night. She looked into the camera, into a world she didn't understand, but one that was suddenly hers to address. Good evening, she said, her voice low and even. My name is Joanne Turner. I'm 78 years old. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and I've been betrayed. The words sat in the air like fog. I won't name names, she said, because names don't matter right now. But trust does. And when you've built your life with trust as the foundation, and someone knocks that out from under you, it doesn't fall in silence. It falls with memory. She folded her hands in her lap, breathed in through her nose. My husband James bought this house for us in 1973. The front door stuck when it rained. The roof always leaked in the guest room, but it was ours. He used to call it the Crooked Castle. I thought that was charming. Her smile trembled but held. We lived here for 42 years before he passed. Cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. He died in the den in the green chair he insisted on keeping, even though it was hideous. I wanted to put it out on the curb so many times, but it stayed. A second notification blinked on the stream. @Rainwalker82 has joined. Joanne didn't react. She continued. We had one son, Paul. Good boy, smart, kind. At least he was. People change. You want to believe blood means loyalty, but I've learned it means proximity. It means access. A third viewer, then 5, then 9. She leaned back slightly, pulled the notebook from her lap, and opened it again. I used to be a teacher, 10th grade English. I loved poetry. I still do. When I get quiet, truly quiet lines start forming in my head like old friends arriving unannounced. She flipped to the second page. I wrote this last night. It's called Signature. Her eyes dropped to the page and her voice shifted from steady to silken. They took my name and pressed it flat like petals under glass. They curved my J, they stole my past, they thought the theft would pass. But names are more than strokes and ink, they're years and hands and grace. So sign away, sweet opportunist, but you can't erase my place. She closed the notebook softly. The chat box blinked. Wild Sparrow, who is this woman? She's giving Grandma Shakespeare RN at DC2. Wait, is she serious? At Heartwood 94, I'm sobbing. Joanne blinked as the comments ticked upward. She could hear the crackling from the candle now and her own heartbeat in her ears. I don't need to be famous, she said. I'm too old for that, thank God. But I do think I might need to be heard. Outside, the wind picked up. The shutters creaked. Downstairs, Melissa was rinsing wine glasses and scrolling her phone. Her eyes caught a new trending video on TikTok, a clip showing a white-haired woman reading poetry in what looked like an attic. She tapped the sound on. The voice was unmistakable. She froze. Paul walked in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands. What's wrong? He asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the volume up. So sign away, sweet opportunist, but you can't erase my place. Melissa's eyes widened. What the hell is this? Paul took the phone, watched the clip play again. A banner at the bottom of the screen read, Attic Joe 78 live now. Above it a trending hashtag, Attic Nun. His face drained. She's live streaming. Melissa stood so fast her chair scraped the tile. She's in the attic. That's what she's been doing. I thought she went to visit Aunt Marie. She hates Aunt Marie. They rushed upstairs. The hallway stretched like a long throat echoing their hurried steps. Melissa banged on the attic door. Joanne, she called. Are you up there? Open the damn door. Inside, Joanne heard the pounding. Her eyes flicked upward toward the ceiling beam, then back at the screen. More comments now. At midnight. Jenny, why is this making me cry? I don't even know her. At Fractured Folk. This is like holy, like we're seeing something real. At Sharp Salt Nabber Attic Nun Rising. Someone give her a podcast ASAP. Joanne didn't move. Melissa banged harder. Paul, go get the key. Paul hesitated. She might have locked it from the inside. She what? They jiggled the handle. The bolt inside held firm. Upstairs, Joanne leaned closer to the webcam. My daughter-in-law is knocking now, she said with a faint amused lift in her voice. She must have heard I went viral. A rush of laughing emojis hit the chat. Rose Glen, I stan her. At Crow's Nest, protect her at all costs. Melissa's voice filtered through the vent. Joanne, are you okay? I'm fine, Joanne said, not yelling, not raising her voice, just letting it travel like a steady tide under the doorframe. I'm starting a new chapter. I'll be up here a while. Melissa turned to Paul. She's lost it. She's got Wi-Fi Mel. She's got half the internet watching her. She hasn't lost a damn thing. Back in the attic, Joanne sat straighter. She reached for her notebook again. Maybe I'll read another one, she said to the camera. This one's older. I wrote it after James died. She adjusted her glasses. Love is not a door that shuts it, is the wind that leaks through cracks. You board it up. It finds new paths. It whispers underneath the facts. So keep your locks and hidden keys. I'll live where love still bends the knees. She finished, exhaled softly. The chat exploded. At Typewriter Soul. You ever just find someone on live and feel like you're watching history? At Real Noir. Mom petitioned to crown her the poet laureate of TikTok. At Modern Hermit, this attic is sacred ground now. The count of viewers surged into the hundreds, then thousands. #AtticNun began trending on the East Coast. A few local accounts reposted clips. One lifestyle blogger tweeted, "Who is this 78-year-old attic poet in Montclair, and why is she dragging my soul through a blender?" Downstairs, Melissa paced. She's making us look crazy. Paul leaned against the banister, arms crossed. Maybe we are. Melissa shot him a look. Don't start. I'm not. I'm just saying this is different. This isn't her usual silent treatment. This is calculated. Melissa went silent. Upstairs, Joanne closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and folded her hands in her lap. I think that's enough for tonight, she said. The chat begged for more. Emojis flooded the screen. She smiled politely at the outpouring, but said nothing more. I'll see you tomorrow, she said softly. Same place, same time. If the world hasn't burned down by then. She reached for the laptop and ended the stream. Darkness filled the room. But across the country, dozens of people were still staring at their phones in quiet disbelief, watching the replay, saving the clip, sharing it. And downstairs in the hallway, Melissa stared up at the attic door where her mother-in-law had built a kingdom out of dust and silence. Paul turned and walked away. Melissa stayed behind, hand resting on the locked doorknob, listening. Inside, Joanne was already writing again. Joanne awoke before sunrise. The attic was still dark except for the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the narrow dormer window. She didn't need an alarm anymore. Her internal clock had reset to the rhythms of thought solitude and something unfamiliar in audience. She reached for her phone and blinked against the screen's light. Notifications. Hundreds of them. Her follower count on TikTok had jumped overnight from 800 to 26,000. Someone had clipped her poem Signature and paired it with piano music. Another had looped the line, "You can't erase my place," over footage of women tearing up eviction notices, signing divorce papers, walking away from bruises. The clip was viral. The account at AtticJoe78 had become a shrine. Joanne rubbed her temples. What on earth? By the time she lit the candle and booted up her old laptop, the chat was already buzzing. People were waiting, dozens, then hundreds. The screen filled with greetings from Ohio, Berlin, Bangkok, Sao Paulo. She adjusted her glasses and leaned into the camera. I didn't expect to wake up famous, she said. Then again, I didn't expect to be 78 living in an attic teaching strangers how to boil water on a camping stove. Life is unpredictable. They loved her. By the end of the live stream, she had read 2 more poems, showed them how she clipped rosemary from an old pot in the window to flavor lentils, and answered a question from someone named @StillHealing1994 about what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you raised. Her answer was quiet, and it hit hard. It feels like watching your own handwriting be used against you, she said. Like hearing your lullaby sung by a thief. The comments were stunned into reverence. That afternoon, Joanne filmed her first kitchen video. She balanced the camera on 2 stacked books and showed how to make grilled cheese on a mini skillet. She sliced the bread slowly, explained why she only used sharp cheddar, none of that pre-shredded nonsense, and pressed it down with a cast-iron lid she had rescued from the basement. I used to make this for my son when he was sick, she added. He'd pretend he didn't want it, but he always ate the corners first. She plated it on a napkin and held it up to the camera with the grace of someone offering communion. By evening, the grilled cheese video had 300,000 views. By morning, it passed 1 million. Her followers were climbing fast, 68,000 and counting. She called them the Attic Choir. Each night she began her live stream the same way. Welcome back. The door is locked. The candle is lit. You're safe here. People sent her messages hundreds a day. Stories of family wounds, of mothers who gambled away savings, of brothers who forged wills, of daughters who disappeared after taking the last check. Joanne read as many as she could. She replied to one letter in a live stream. I got a note from someone named Claire in Kansas, she said. She said, I watched your video while sitting in my car trying to decide whether to walk back into my house or just keep driving. Claire, if you're watching, turn around. Go home. Not because they deserve you, but because you deserve to choose what comes next. The comments lit up. Claire Bear, 1979. I'm here. I turned around. Thank you. That moment got picked up by a small online magazine, Storyground, known for spotlighting niche internet creators. They titled the article, The Nun in the Attic One Woman's Silent Storm. It was raw, beautiful, and honest. They quoted her grilled cheese recipe like scripture. The subtitle read, Her son stole her signature. She stole the internet. By the time Paul saw the article, it had already been forwarded by 2 co-workers and mentioned jokingly on a Slack thread titled Revenge Goals. He sat at his desk pale, scrolling through the piece with fingers that couldn't stop twitching. There was a photo of Joanne, her face lit by candlelight eyes, steady, surrounded by mason jars and stacked books. She looked peaceful, powerful. There was a clip embedded in the article. Paul clicked play. Joanne's voice came through. Don't scream, don't chase, don't beg. Just disappear into the storm until they realize you were the weather. The quote hit him like a punch. He shut the laptop. His phone buzzed. A text from Greg in accounting. Hey, isn't this your mom? She's kind of a legend. Paul tossed the phone onto the table. Back home, Melissa was in the guest room on her knees with a box cutter ripping open old file folders. Her hands were shaking. She knew the moment would come, the moment Joanne would connect the dots. Document the forgery dig into the paperwork that had been accidentally left in the wrong drawer. But she hadn't expected this. Not fame, not a movement, not public humiliation. The folder she tore open was from the spring refinance. The document with the forged signature was still in the safe, but there were copies. Copies Melissa had buried in boxes, thinking the attic was nothing more than cobwebs and dust. She flipped through page after page, heart pounding. Her palms were damp. She started stacking papers into a shredder pile, then stopped. Would shredding look suspicious? Would burning be worse? She grabbed a trash bag, stuffed it full, hauled it out the back door in the rain, and shoved it into the neighbor's recycling bin. It wasn't enough. She returned inside, dripping, panting, and went straight for the liquor cabinet. Paul came home 20 minutes later. She's posted another one, he muttered, tossing his coat onto the couch. Melissa turned glass in hand. Another what? Another poem. About you. Melissa's throat tightened. She used my name. No. But she said, and I quote, when the knife comes from someone you fed, it cuts in silence. Great, Melissa said, draining the glass. Now I'm metaphorical. Paul sat down. We need to get ahead of this. Get ahead of what she's already viral. We're the villains in a fable now. He rubbed his face. I didn't think she'd fight back. Melissa laughed bitterly. That's what old people do, Paul. They disappear. They forgive. They die. They don't go live from the attic. He stood. Maybe we should talk to her. Melissa glared. And say what? Hey, sorry we forged your signature, but could you stop being an internet saint about it? The room pulsed with silence. Upstairs in the attic, Joanne read aloud from a new message. This one's from a woman in Detroit. She said, I watched you boil rice on that little stove, and it reminded me I'm not trapped in my own kitchen. I'm just waiting for the right flame. Joanne smiled. I love that. The right flame. The candle flickered beside her. She looked into the camera, eyes sharp. I want to say something clearly tonight in case someone's watching and wondering if they're being too dramatic, too emotional, too much. You are not too anything. You are finally just enough to walk out of the cage they built for you. The chat exploded. Elm Tree Soul. I swear this woman is keeping me alive, Ern. At Tiny Stove Poet. She's not just cooking, she's cooking my trauma. At Backseat Phoenix. Someone give her a TV show before I burn down cable myself. Downstairs, the walls of the house felt different, quieter, like they were leaning in to listen. Joanne's live stream ended with a simple promise. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to make my husband's favorite stew on a stove the size of a shoebox. Love wins, even in a pot this small. She ended the stream. The attic fell silent. Outside, the wind howled. The storm hadn't come yet, but it was building. And for once, Joanne wasn't beneath it, she was becoming it. The attic smelled faintly of chamomile that morning. Joanne had just finished her daily live stream, a soft reading of Emily Dickinson, followed by a quiet demonstration of how to steep lemon thyme tea using old tea bags she'd carefully saved in a mason jar. She didn't do it to be fancy. She just liked the ritual. Her viewers adored it. They commented on her choice of mug, screenshotted her hands as she stirred and dubbed the entire experience the Attic Apothecary. She was scrolling through comments, some sweet, some soul-bearing one, unexpectedly poetic, that read, You brew truth like it's steeped in moonlight, when a new email pinged into her inbox. Subject sponsorship opportunity, Whispering Pines Tea Co. Joanne blinked, skeptical. At first glance, she assumed it was spam. But the logo looked legitimate, and the sender wasn't a sketchy address. The note came from someone named Chelsea, a marketing manager, who wrote that she had cried after watching Joanne's live stream titled, You Were the Weather. The message was professional, warm, and unusually personal. Chelsea wrote, We don't usually advertise through influencers, but you're not an influencer. You're something else. We believe in healing, and you're helping people heal. We'd be honored if you'd simply mention our lavender blend. No scripts, no pressure. Just you. A mug. A moment. We'll pay you fairly. Joanne read the message 3 times. Then she looked across the attic at her old rag doll Velma. Faded pink dress, one eye missing, slumped against a wooden crate like a forgotten queen. Velma had sat quietly by Joanne's side for 40 years, surviving 2 generations of children and 1 great betrayal. Joanne smiled. Well, she murmured, I guess we're in business, Velma. The next day, she filmed the simplest video she could imagine. No background music, no editing. Just a quiet moment in the attic, a candle flickering, her camping stove hissing softly, and Joanne herself pouring hot water over the tea bag. Velma sat beside the mug, propped up with a small blanket tucked around her. Joanne looked into the lens with calm, knowing eyes. People ask me how I stay steady, she said. The answer's simple. Lavender. Time. And the knowledge that you can still taste peace even in a room that smells like insulation and grief. Her hand trembled slightly from arthritis as she lifted the mug, but that only made her more beloved. The clip racked up 1.2 million views in 24 hours. Whispering Pines sold out of lavender tea within 3 days. The company's online shop crashed twice. A new hashtag was born, #AtticTea. Joanne didn't talk about the payment. She never mentioned sponsorship. But the money from that one clip went somewhere sacred to legal fees. She hired a lawyer, quietly, deliberately, and without asking for permission, she researched firms for 3 days straight. She looked for lawyers who had experience in elder exploitation real estate fraud and the kind of betrayal that happened behind locked family doors. She settled on a boutique firm in Newark, women-owned, sharp, discreet. Their motto read, "We represent the silenced." That was all she needed to see. Joanne never stepped foot in their office. She did everything digitally, carefully scanning the forged documents, snapping photos of her handwritten records, uploading the deed, and attaching a sworn statement written in a trembling but resolute hand, 5 pages long. She submitted screenshots of her banking records, images of Melissa's forged signature beside her authentic ones, and even included a copy of a journal entry she'd written months before discovering the fraud. The poem was titled "Buried in the Fine Print." They responded the next morning. Her assigned attorney was a woman named Nora. Nora appeared on Zoom in a maroon turtleneck and tortoiseshell glasses, seated in front of a wall of legal books and a print of Frida Kahlo. "Mrs. Turner," she began first off, "I'm a fan. My mother watches your live streams while folding laundry." Joanne nodded, amused. "I've reviewed everything you sent." Nora continued, "This is forgery. It's textbook. The bank approved the documents, but they were criminally submitted. You have legal standing to recover ownership and possibly pursue civil damages." Joanne said nothing. Nora leaned in. "Are you okay?" Joanne nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Just not used to anyone standing in front of me when the fire starts." Nora softened. "You're not standing alone. You already set the fire. I'm just bringing gasoline and paperwork." She added gently but firmly, "This will take time, and it won't be clean, but if you stay silent long enough and keep your receipts, we'll win." Joanne wrote those words down in her notebook like scripture. Stay silent, keep receipts, win. Later that day, she taught herself how to scan documents. It was an ordeal. Her printer jammed. The scanner program froze 3 times. She spilled tea on the instruction manual. But by sunset, she'd uploaded everything to Nora's secure drive and printed the initial complaint. The complaint sat in her lap like a confession. She folded it, sealed it in a priority mail envelope, and slipped out of the house without a sound. She wore sunglasses and a scarf the way she used to when sneaking to the movies alone after James died. She paid in cash at the post office and asked for a tracking receipt. She folded the receipt in thirds and tucked it in the top of her bra. She walked home slower than usual, the dusk folding over her shoulders like an old coat. Back inside the house, the hallway felt longer. Just as she reached the attic stairs, she heard footsteps below. Paul. He stood at the base of the steps looking up. "Mom." His voice was careful, like someone approaching an unfamiliar animal. Joanne froze. A pause, then a soft knock. "You up there?" She didn't respond. He lingered. I saw the tea video. The doll was a nice touch," he said, awkward. She said nothing. He tried again. "You looked, I don't know, peaceful." Still nothing. "I just want to talk. Not about money, not about anything really, just talk." His voice cracked a little, but Joanne stood still on the other side of the door. He waited. "I'm sorry," he whispered so quietly even the walls didn't believe him. And then he walked away. Joanne waited 30 seconds, then clicked the bolt lock into place. She returned to her desk, opened her journal, and wrote, "Apologies whispered through wood are like unsigned checks, useless unless cashed in public." Then she powered up the camera not for live stream, just for herself. She hit record. Her face was tired, but her eyes burned. "I mailed the papers today," she said softly. "With my name, my real one." She held up the tracking receipt like a badge. "They thought I'd stay broken, that I'd stay silent, that an attic would be my ending." She leaned in. They were wrong. The knock came at 11:42 a.m. Melissa was in the kitchen halfway through stirring oat milk into her second coffee when the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, with none of the hesitation that usually came from delivery drivers or lost realtors. She walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. A woman stood at the gate, 30-something, shoulder-length curls, a blazer too sharp for the suburbs, and a camera crew of 2 behind her. One held a boom mic, the other balanced a compact shoulder rig already recording. Melissa's stomach tightened. She opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Riley Torres. I'm a reporter with WESN News Newark Bureau. I was hoping to speak with Joanne Turner." Melissa's fingers curled around the edge of the door. "She's not available." Riley smiled politely. "We've been following her live streams. The story has really taken off. The public's very interested." "Well, the public can stay interested from the other side of the fence," Melissa snapped. "We're not doing interviews." "Actually," Riley continued, her voice calm, "I have reason to believe this property was fraudulently leveraged in a second mortgage. That makes it a matter of public record, and your mother-in-law's live stream has made it arguably a matter of public interest." Melissa slammed the door. Paul came out of the den rubbing his temples. "What was that?" "She brought a camera crew, Paul. They're trying to film the damn house." "They can't do that without permission. They're already doing it." She threw the curtain aside again. The crew was now on the sidewalk across the street, filming the house from a low angle, zooming in on the top floor window where a candle flickered faintly behind aged glass. "The attic." Paul pulled the curtain shut. "You think she planned this?" "I think she is this." That night, the segment aired during prime time. Joanne didn't even know about it until her follower count jumped by another 80,000 in 4 hours. She noticed it during her evening tea live stream, where she was showing how to steep hibiscus with dried orange peel and talking softly about resilience. In the chat, people started typing. "We saw you on TV. The attic grandma has risen. Justice in flannel." She blinked, confused. On TV. In Montclair, the glow from living rooms illuminated faces all watching the same thing. A tight, slow zoom on the flickering attic window. A narrator speaking with reverence. In a quiet house on Chestnut Street, an elderly woman has turned her exile into a revolution. They call her the attic grandma, but she calls herself something simpler, a woman with receipts. Clips played from Joanne's streams, the grilled cheese, the lavender tea, the line about storms. Cut with shots of her attic lit like an altar. Riley's voice steady and empathetic. While her family lives below her, this 78-year-old has become a symbol of something bigger, silence weaponized into visibility. By morning, they were parked outside. Not reporters, not the press. People, viewers, followers, strangers who called themselves the choir and carried battery-powered candles. Some wore flannel scarves in tribute. Some brought lavender sachets. Others carried signs that read, "Listen to Joanne, and Justice is a quiet woman with a mug." They stood on the sidewalk in silence. They weren't loud, they didn't chant, they just showed up. Every night starting at dusk. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Melissa called it a cult. Paul sat in the living room, unable to meet her eyes. "They're here because of her. They're here because we got caught," she spat. "No," he said softly, "they're here because we tried to bury a woman who taught the world how to dig." Melissa paced. "She's going to ruin us." Paul didn't argue. He just picked up his phone and opened the article again. The headline had been updated. "The attic grandma silent icon of justice." Joanne saw it too. Her eyes lingered on the word justice. That night she lit the candle beside Velma and began her live stream earlier than usual. Her face filled the screen. Tired, resolute. No background music. Just the sound of wind outside and a candle flickering. "I've had a lot of people ask me how I'm not angry," she began. The chat slowed, quieted. "I am," she said, her voice softer now, but not in the way they expect. "I'm not angry like a fire. I'm angry like stone. I don't burn. I stay." She held up the envelope from her lawyer unopened. "Inside this are the next steps, legal ones, and I'll take them. But I'm not here for revenge. A beat. I'm here for clarity. For all the women locked in rooms who've been told it's their fault, their age, their silence that invited betrayal." She reached for her tea, sipped. "Justice doesn't arrive on a horse. It doesn't crash through windows. It doesn't even knock loud. It comes softly, patiently, with a paper trail and a name spelled correctly." She leaned closer. "Justice doesn't come from screaming, it comes from endurance." The chat exploded. "Tea with Clara chills. Literal chills. At Sue, broken, someone print this speech and frame it. At attic choir lead." I've never followed anyone this hard in my life. Outside, someone lit the first real candle, then another. The whole sidewalk glowed. Paul stood at the living room window and saw it, this strange congregation of quiet supporters holding lights like a vigil. He turned to Melissa. "We need to stop pretending this will go away." Melissa stared at him like he'd grown moss. "This is going away. You're going to talk to her. Get her to shut it down. Threaten her with exposure if you have to. She wants exposure. Then bribe her." Paul laughed once bitter. You don't bribe a woman with half the country singing her poems back to her. Joanne upstairs closed her laptop. The stream had ended. The numbers continued to climb, likes, follows, retweets, remixes. She didn't care about any of it. She walked to the attic window and looked down. There they were, candles, scarves, gentle signs held up in mittened hands. One girl, maybe 19, had written in Sharpie on her coat sleeve, "Joanne taught me how to leave without slamming the door." Joanne felt something crack gently behind her ribs. Not pain, not even triumph. Recognition. And then peace. It happened on a Wednesday morning, unseasonably warm, the air too still for January. The neighborhood was quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with tension just beneath the surface, like a teacup rattling on a table before the quake truly begins. Melissa stood at the foot of the attic stairs, one hand balled into a fist, the other gripping her phone like a weapon. She'd spent the last hour pacing the hallway, muttering to herself. Paul had locked himself in the bathroom, pretending he didn't hear her. The vigil outside had doubled overnight. People now left flowers on the front steps. That morning, the New York Times ran a headline, "When the Quiet Speak, the Attic Grandma's Fight for Justice," and it broke something in Melissa. She stormed up the staircase in bare feet, hair unbrushed, a rage not entirely her own, bubbling out from somewhere deeper, some dark ancestral corner that hated women like Joanne for refusing to die quietly. She reached the attic door, slammed her palm against it. "Joanne," she barked, "open the goddamn door." Silence. Melissa gritted her teeth, stepped back, then kicked, hard. The door didn't budge. She kicked again, then again, wood cracked. "Paul," she screamed down the stairs. "She's locked herself in with a fucking chain." Still no answer. Inside the attic, Joanne sat perfectly still in her rocking chair, a candle lit beside her camera, quietly recording. She didn't flinch at the sound of splintering wood. She had installed the steel chain herself 3 days prior, after one of her viewers sent her a link to top 5 security hacks for solo seniors. She had watched the video twice, ordered the chain, installed it in silence. Melissa kicked again, let out a strangled scream, then began hammering the door with her shoulder. Next door, the Watleys heard the noise. So did the Chan twins down the block. And by the time Melissa had put a hairline split in the upper doorframe, at least 3 neighbors were on their porches filming. One posted to TikTok with the caption, "Attic Grandma's daughter-in-law tries to break in. We got you, Joe." Within an hour, the clip had 900,000 views. Within 2, it was national news. The image was arresting a woman in a tank top and sweatpants, wild-eyed, pounding on a wooden attic door, while chants of justice for Joanne echoed faintly from outside. The comments were merciless. "At spoon-fed revenge." "Melissa, sweetie. She chained the door because she knew you'd try this." "At Velma Fan Club." "Imagine going viral for losing a fight to your mother-in-law's hinge." "At Lawyer Lori." "Hey, Joanne. I'm a probate attorney in Seattle. Call me." Paul saw the video in the car parked 2 blocks away, pretending to be out for errands. When he returned home, Melissa was on the floor, sobbing not from pain but from something worse, exposure. "They think I'm crazy," she wept. "They think I'm violent." Paul didn't argue. He couldn't. That afternoon, a new scene unfolded. In a quiet courtroom in Essex County, Nora stood beside Joanne, clean-pressed and sharp-eyed, handing over a thick folder to the clerk. The room was nearly empty, just a bailiff, a board clerk, and a few reporters pretending to read their notes. The folder contained a notarized complaint of property fraud, copies of the forged mortgage signature, a handwriting analysis from a retired FBI document examiner, bank transfers traced from the second lien to Paul and Melissa's joint account, a sworn affidavit from Joanne, a copy of her viral video, "Storms Don't Scream." Nora looked calm, controlled. Joanne looked like stone. The clerk stamped the file. The sound echoed like a drum. A week later, Paul received the summons. He opened the envelope with shaking fingers, alone at the kitchen table, while Melissa sat in the guest room refusing to speak. His name stared back at him in bold, "In the Superior Court of New Jersey, Civil Division, Paul Turner defendant." A date, a courtroom, a page that read, "Allegation fraudulent misappropriation of elder property." His throat dried, his vision blurred. He read the name again, Joanne Turner, plaintiff. There it was, official, irrefutable. Melissa found him still sitting there. An hour later, the letter unfolded in front of him like a confession. She filed. He nodded once. She's really doing this. She already did. Melissa's voice cracked. We're screwed. She stood up, began pacing. We have to sell, she said. Now, before it gets worse. Paul blinked. Sell what? The house? The house she just filed to reclaim ownership of. We'll flip it. Fast. We'll find a buyer who doesn't look too close. Strip it clean and go to Florida. Or out west. I don't care. We start over. She's not going to let us just take the money and vanish, Melissa snapped. Then we don't ask permission. She grabbed a legal pad and began jotting down numbers, realtors they knew. Contacts from her old job in finance. Her hands were shaking, her mind already calculating escape. Paul stood. No. Melissa looked up. What? He swallowed. We're not running, not like this. Her laugh was hollow, guttural. You think you still have dignity in this? You think you can stay here and play husband and son and fraudster and no one's going to notice? She's not trying to ruin us. Oh, really? She just filed a lawsuit, Paul. She's not trying to ruin us, he repeated, quieter. She's trying to be heard. Melissa slammed the pen down. Well, guess what? I heard her, and so did the world. Now we either pack up or we drown. Upstairs, Joanne sat in the soft light of the attic, rocking slowly, hands folded, Velma on the shelf beside her. She'd read the news about the court filing hours before it was public. Nora had sent her a text. It's official. The war has started. But Joanne didn't feel like she was at war. She felt still. She'd waited too long to move in anger, and now she moved in precision. She looked down at the candle, then opened her journal and wrote, You don't break a house by kicking the door. You break it by naming what happened inside. It was supposed to be private. Paul waited until the house was quiet, until Melissa had left to drop off more boxes at the storage unit, until the neighbors had gone back inside, until the vigil crowd outside had thinned to a small circle of regulars, murmuring poetry into the dark. He climbed the attic stairs slowly, a white handkerchief balled up in his palm, like he wasn't sure if this was a confrontation or a surrender. He didn't knock. He just stood there, breathing, his shadow sliced into pieces by the fractured light under the attic door. Joanne heard him before he spoke. She didn't turn around. She sat at her desk back straight, writing something into her notebook with deliberate strokes. Mom, he said quietly. She didn't answer. Please. Still nothing. He stepped closer to the door. Can I come in? A long pause. Then if you can still open this door, it means I haven't locked it. The doorknob turned with a click. He stepped inside. The attic was smaller than he remembered, or maybe his guilt made it feel that way. Joanne didn't glance at him. Her candle was lit. Velma, her rag doll, sat beside a fresh cup of tea. The camera was off, pointed away. I didn't come to fight, he said. She nodded once but said nothing. Paul stepped forward. I came to apologize, sort of. She looked at the wall. I know what I did, he said. I know it was wrong. I didn't think it would go this far. Joanne raised an eyebrow. I thought I could fix it. I thought maybe if we just stayed quiet long enough it would pass. I didn't expect this. He gestured vaguely at the candlelight, at the screen, at the weight of the attic. I didn't expect you to become you. Joanne finally turned. Her eyes were calm, not cruel. You expected me to be small, she said. That's different. Paul swallowed. I needed help. She stared at him, waiting. I was drowning. The bills, the house, Melissa losing her job, the market crashing. I didn't know what else to do. Joanne's voice was soft, but it struck like stone. So you stole from your mother. I didn't mean. You forged my name. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, he said again, but I needed the money. She took a long breath. And then without bitterness, without anger, just truth, she said. You didn't need the money. You needed me, but you chose the money. Paul blinked like he'd been slapped. His mouth opened, then closed. No argument came. What neither of them realized, what Joanne would later call God's timing, and Paul would call cosmic karma, was that the camera had been on, accidentally, or maybe not. A default setting she hadn't changed. The mic had been live. The platform had pushed a notification. Attic Joe 78 has gone live. And within seconds, thousands of people were watching. They watched Paul confess. They watched Joanne sit still and absorb it. They watched her speak the truth that so many had been waiting to say themselves. "You needed me," she'd said, "but you chose the money." When Paul turned to leave, he looked shattered, not because she'd rejected him, but because she hadn't. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown him out. She'd told him the truth and left him standing in the rubble of it. By the time the stream auto-ended, over 1.1 million people had watched. Clips exploded across the internet. The quote, "You didn't need the money, you needed me, but you chose the money," appeared in black and white on tote bags projected onto protest signs inked into tattoos. Joanne didn't even know the clip had gone viral until Nora called her the next morning. "We've got a friend," Nora said. Joanne, still half asleep, sipped her tea. "A what?" "An ally. High profile. Name's Chantel Cruz. She's a senior partner at Curtis & Blake in Manhattan. Saw the clip. Says it hit her like scripture. She's offering her firm pro bono. Says you shouldn't have to pay a dime for justice." Joanne didn't speak for a few seconds. "Then I always liked people named Chantel." That afternoon, the court issued a freeze on all transactions related to the house. The order was clear: pending full investigation of fraudulent transfer and elder financial abuse, all property rights revert to the original title holder, Joanne Turner, until resolution. Melissa read the letter at the kitchen table. Then she broke, not loudly, not in one single crash. It was more like unraveling. She opened every drawer in the kitchen, dumping silverware into boxes with trembling hands. She pulled framed pictures off the walls, cracked two by accident. She cried not pretty tears, not delicate sniffles, but a guttural gasping sound that echoed into the cabinets like a haunted melody. Paul just stood in the doorway watching. She tried to talk between sobs. "Do you know what they're saying about me online? That I'm poison, that I married you to get to your mother, that I forged everything." Paul said nothing. She collapsed onto the floor, still gripping a framed photo of their wedding glass now missing. "She was supposed to die," Melissa whispered. Paul blinked. "What?" "She was supposed to die like the rest of them. Quiet, unknowing. We weren't supposed to get caught." Upstairs, Joanne sat by the window holding a new letter from Nora. It was brief and beautiful. "We won the first round. The court had granted her temporary sole authority over the property. Melissa and Paul had been ordered to vacate until the trial. The hearing date was set for 6 weeks. Joanne placed the letter down and stood. She walked to the attic window and looked out over the street. The vigil crowd had grown. Someone had built a little makeshift bench. A woman in a yellow scarf handed out tea bags with handwritten poems attached. A child stood holding a sign that read, "Attics are sacred." Down below, the front door creaked open. Melissa emerged, eyes red, dragging a suitcase behind her. Paul followed with 2 more bags, shoulders hunched like a man being marched to a firing squad. Neither of them looked up. Joanne didn't wave. She didn't gloat. She just watched. Melissa loaded the car, slammed the trunk, stood there for a moment with her hand on the door, trying to breathe. Then she broke again, this time silent, shoulders shaking, head bowed. Paul didn't console her. He stood still, looking up at the attic window. He knew she was watching. He knew she'd always be watching now, not because she was his mother, but because she had finally become something he couldn't erase. He stood there for a full minute, face pale, lips, tight eyes hollow. And Joanne, still calm, still lit by a candle, and the warm glow of vindication closed the curtain. The latch clicked just after dawn. 2 months. 62 days. Joanne Turner hadn't stepped outside the attic in over 8 weeks. Not a single foot down the stairs. Not one glance out the living room window. The world came to her through screens, letters, whispers through wood. But this morning was different. She stood at the attic door in a soft cardigan and slacks, hair pinned the way she used to for church, hands folded in front of her. Velma, her rag doll, sat quietly on the desk behind her, watching. Joanne took one final look around the attic. The lamp, the camping stove, the folded quilts, the notebooks stacked like sacred texts, and then reached for the bolt. It slid back with a clean metallic sound, like the attic itself was exhaling. She turned the knob. The door opened. For a moment she just stood there, holding the edge of the frame, breathing in the air of the hallway like it was foreign. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and old wood. Memory. The camera mounted on the attic's beam was already live. The little red light blinked quietly. Thousands were watching. Word had spread from a cryptic message Joanne posted the night before. Tomorrow morning the door opens. Now it had. She stepped forward. The stairs creaked under her weight, deliberate each footfall echoing with a softness that still carried power. She held the railing, took her time, no rush. Each step felt earned, owned. Outside, reporters pressed against the front gate. Cameramen adjusted lenses. The street had been barricaded by police hours ago, but it hadn't stopped the crowd. News trucks lined the block like satellites around a signal. A drone hovered above the Turner home. Neighbors leaned over porches, clapping softly, as if greeting royalty. A little boy waved a homemade sign that read, "The attic is open," and inside Joanne moved like a tide descending. At the foot of the staircase she paused. Sunlight streamed through the east window, catching the dust in the air like glitter. She walked down the hallway, past the photos she'd once stopped looking at, past the kitchen she'd cooked in for 40 years. Everything was untouched, just quieter now. The living room came into view. The chair waited by the window, her chair. Worn floral fabric, slight sag on the left side. The same place she used to knit every morning when James was alive, before the betrayal, before the door was ever locked. She crossed the room and sat. Outside, the reporters surged forward, flashes sparked, but inside Joanne was still. She reached for her tablet on the side table, propped it up on a small easel, and tapped into her live stream app. She was live in seconds. The screen filled with viewers, tens of thousands logging in by the minute, then hundreds of thousands. Comments flooded in. At window light. She's down the stairs. I'm crying. At quiet revolutionary. This feels like history. At attic choir forever. Grandma came home. Joanne adjusted her scarf. She looked into the camera. I don't have a script, she began. I didn't come down here with a speech in my pocket or a plan in my head. I just came back to sit in the place they tried to erase me from. She leaned slightly forward. People keep asking if this was revenge. A pause. No, she said. This wasn't about punishment, or rage, or getting even. It was about returning, about reclaiming, about reminding people that when you're erased, your only job is to write yourself back in. The chat exploded. She smiled faintly. I never wanted their shame or their guilt. I only ever wanted my chair. Another pause. Her voice dropped quieter now. I didn't climb back down to gloat. I came down to sit. She placed her hands on the arms of the chair, steady, firm. I'm not angry, she continued. I'm not broken. I'm not even tired. Then she said the line that would go on to be etched into headlines, quoted in essays, tattooed on arms, and tweeted across continents. I didn't take revenge. I simply took back the seat I never should have been asked to give up. The live stream froze for a moment under the weight of too many views. By the time it resumed, the number at the top of the screen had ticked over. 2.3 million followers. She blinked, barely registering the figure. It's just a chair, she whispered, but it's mine. The camera held her in silence for a beat, then two. She didn't move. She just sat. Outside, the crowd clapped. But inside, Joanne closed her eyes, tipped her head toward the sun streaming through the window, and smiled. Freedom didn't always roar. Sometimes it rocked gently in a worn-out armchair and sipped tea without apology. The living room smelled like turpentine and lavender. Joanne had opened all the windows. The curtains breathed in and out with the spring breeze, and sunlight fell like spilled milk across the wood floor. In the center of it all sat an easel, brand new, facing the garden. A canvas stretched tightly across the frame, already kissed with faint lines of blue and gray. She dipped her brush into a mason jar of water, then into paint, and began again. She hadn't painted in over 40 years. Not since James. Not since the attic had become a place for memories instead of beginnings. But now she painted every morning after tea. She worked in silence. No live streams, no commentary. Just color. The first piece she finished was titled The View from the Inside. It was a soft, abstract depiction of the attic, its candlelight glow, the little desk in the corner, the faint shape of Velma, the rag doll perched like a guardian. She posted a photo of it quietly one afternoon. No caption, just the image. It received over 200,000 likes in an hour. But that wasn't the point anymore. The world had given her a spotlight. She had turned it into a lamp and kept painting. One morning, an envelope arrived at the front door, thick, heavy, with a wax seal, and the name Penridge House Publishing printed on the corner. Joanne read the letter in the quiet of her kitchen glasses, perched on her nose, tea steeping beside her. They wanted to publish her story. Not just the live streams, not just the viral quotes and court documents. They wanted her voice, her full story, her life before and after the attic, her poems, her silence, her storm. There would be a ghostwriter if she preferred. She didn't. The advance was generous, the offer respectful. She wrote back 2 days later by hand and accepted. Word spread quickly. Within a week, she was featured in Publishers Weekly under the headline, "From Attic to Author, Joanne Turner's Quiet Reclamation." That same week, a group of high school students in Vermont submitted essays to the National Young Writers Competition. The prompt had been, "Name someone who changed the world without shouting." Half the submissions referenced Joanne. One student wrote, "She taught us that protest doesn't have to be loud to be seismic. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is make grilled cheese on a camping stove while the world watches you rise." Another simply titled their essay, "My Grandmother Doesn't Knit, but She Could Be Joanne Turner." The entries reached Joanne through a teacher named Mr. Clark, who emailed her after school one afternoon with scanned copies and a short note. "Thank you for showing them that power has no age and healing has no script." She printed every essay and kept them in a folder beside her easel. But not everything that followed was beautiful. The trial proceeded quietly but firmly. Melissa pled guilty to felony-level financial exploitation, submitting a full confession under the pressure of mounting digital evidence and public scrutiny. The courtroom was cold the day of sentencing. Joanne sat in the back row in a soft gray coat, fingers laced, silent as ever. Melissa stood pale and hollow before the judge. Her sentence, 2 years of supervised probation. Restitution payments to Joanne totaling $184,000 over 10 years. A restraining order. A public apology read aloud in court. She didn't cry. She didn't look at Joanne once. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for a statement. Joanne gave them only 5 words. Justice arrived, quiet and whole. Paul never showed. Not to the courtroom, not to the apology, not to any of it. He vanished the week before the hearing. His car was found at the edge of a state park in western Pennsylvania, keys still in the ignition. No note, no trail, just a backpack in the passenger seat with a toothbrush, 2 books, and a half-eaten protein bar. Some believed he'd fled the country. Others said he checked into a monastery. A few thought he'd joined some kind of modern-day penitent movement. Joanne didn't speculate. When a reporter asked her if she thought he would come back, she said, "That depends. Does shame have a return policy?" But behind closed doors in a letter she never sent, she wrote, "You were my boy, the one I read to, the one I named after my father. I wanted to believe you were lost in something temporary, but I see now you were swimming toward something you thought looked like freedom. I'm sorry it turned out to be just debt and regret in disguise." She folded the letter, placed it in the same box that held her marriage certificate and the deed to the house. Then one afternoon in late spring, she sat at the dining table with a fountain pen and a fresh sheet of paper. No lights, no live stream, just ink and bone and resolve. She wrote, "To those who sat with me in silence, to those who held candles outside my door, who brewed lavender in honor, who whispered my words into their own dark rooms. You don't need an attic. You don't need a camera. You don't need a million followers. You just need one locked door and the courage to name it. Each of us has a place inside that they tried to board up. A stairway they told us not to climb. A room they said we didn't belong in. Mine was an attic. Yours might be a cubicle or a kitchen or the back pew of a church. But make no mistake, every attic can be transformed into a pulpit, a stage, a courtroom, a home. Every person has the right to reclaim the place they were told to leave. I didn't fight to be a symbol. I fought to be myself. So wherever you are, whatever has been taken from you, I hope you walk back into that room and say, I'm not gone. I'm just beginning. With love and light, Joanne Turner." She mailed copies to schools, to nonprofits, to domestic violence shelters, to every woman who'd sent her a handwritten letter over the last 6 months. She ended the letter with a small handwritten line beneath her name. "Every person has an attic. Use yours to rise." And then she went back to the window, dipped her brush in yellow, and started her next painting. The screen flickers to life, black at first, then fading into soft golden light. A slow montage begins. No voiceover yet. Just music, simple piano, slow and reverent, like a memory being dusted off. We see her hands first, gnarled but gentle, lighting a lavender candle beside her notebook. Then a clip of her turning toward the camera for the very first time. Eyes steady, mouth uncertain, whispering, "Good evening. My name is Joanne Turner, and I've been betrayed." The image lingers on her face. Cut to a bowl of lentils, steaming gently beside a miniature camping stove. Her fingers stir slowly with a wooden spoon. A teaspoon of dried rosemary drops in with intention. Then a clip of her reading poetry. "So sign away, sweet opportunist, but you can't erase my place." The chat reactions flood the screen, transparent over her image. "At heart in pieces. I'm crying." "At worn out but alive. She's saving us." "At attic nun supreme. This is what church should have been." Her smile flickers. Then a grainy clip of the chain lock being installed on the attic door, trembling hands with a screwdriver, breath held in quiet defiance. A candle burns behind her. Next, a moment that launched 1,000 hashtags. Joanne holding up her mug beside Velma, the ragdoll eyes twinkling as she says, "You can still taste peace even in a room that smells like insulation and grief." The music swells. Footage shifts. Sidewalk candlelight vigils, flannel scarves tied around tree trunks, the handwritten sign that read, "Attics are sacred." Then Paul's voice, from the accidental live stream, heard again, "I'm sorry, but I needed the money." And Joanne's quiet reply, "No, you needed me, but you chose the money." The screen flashes white. Newspaper headlines fade in and out. The Attic Rebellion. One woman's quiet revolution. How Joanne Turner lit a candle and burned a lie. Grandma of justice. Why millions sat at her feet. The music dips, softer now, deeper. And then we hear her voice again, reading from a letter. "You don't need an attic. You just need one locked door and the courage to name it." Images flood in. The easel by the window. Her first painting. A handwritten letter with her signature in blue ink. A group of high school students standing in front of a mural of her face. A final clip plays her last live stream. She sits in her armchair, the same one by the window, bathed in light. She's older now somehow, both more worn and more radiant. Her voice steady. Betrayal isn't the period at the end of a sentence. It's just the start of a new chapter. Cut to black. Then slowly an image fades in. Joanne sitting by the window. Sunset pouring in, wrapping around her like silk. She's holding a cup of tea, eyes closed. Her mouth lifts in the faintest, most knowing smile. She's not watching the world anymore. The world is watching her. The screen fades to black again. A single line appears typed slowly, deliberately across the screen. Joanne Turner, the woman who turned an attic into a courtroom of justice. The music plays its final note. Silence. And then the end.